Thanks for downloading this episode from Teachers Talk Radio. You can find the full schedule and listen back to all our shows at ttradio.org. Enjoy the podcast.
Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Points of View. So today I'm joined by Tom, Brent, and Tarjinder, and we're going to be discussing a few different topics that have been, on the topic of EduX and just in education generally in the past week. And we're going to be discussing two different topics today. So the first one that we're going to be discussing is essentially about empire. And the second one is about exclusions off the back of an article that was released earlier this week that suggested exclusions for knives are too simple. So I think we'll be starting with empire. And I'm going to hand over to Brent.
No.
Well,
he's next. No, it's me. It's
you.
you.
Sorry, Tom. It's you, Tom.
Sorry,
well, we are sponsored by.
Sorry, forgot that.
So the show this morning is, of course, supported by John Catt Educational.
Hello, John.
Hi, John. Who are leading publishers of professional development books and resources for schools around the world, not even the UK, the world. And you can pick up 20% off any John Catt book by using JCTTR2425 on the website when you pop the books in the basket. The other I forgot to put the banner up. Doesn't matter. John Catt. Everyone remember. And also we've got USA Study, who is our one-stop platform for guiding students through their application journey. So if you have any students who are age 16 and up, who are considering going to study in the United States of America, then do check out usastudy.co.uk. Have a chat with Phil. He's fantastic. He knows everything there is to know about moving to the USA on a scholarship or going to study in the USA. So check out USA Study. And of course, on the 1st of March, 2025, we have TTR Connect in Manchester, our biggest free event ever, with strands in English, maths, science, MFL, history, RS, primary, a bit of leadership, a bit of coaching, a bit of inclusion, a bit of other stuff thrown into the mix as well. And yeah, it's going to be absolutely fantastic. So definitely get involved in that. I'm going to hand back to Yasmin now.
Thank you so much, Tom. So our first topic, if you wouldn't mind just putting the banner up for me.
I will. I've lost it, but yeah, I will in 2 seconds.
You've lost the banner or lost the empire.
Listen, do you know what I'll do? I'll make another one. Because, I'm smashing this.
So our first topic, Brent and Tom are both history teachers. And, I think history was my favorite subject at school. What was yours, Tarjinder?
History as well, funnily
Really?
enough.
Wow, crazy.
Followed it the whole way throughout. History and then politics.
Oh, amazing. So this first discussion, this is the one I don't have much to say on, actually. So how should we teach empire? Anyone want to go first?
Well, Star Wars.
Fine, but you've got more to say, Brent, to be fair, go first.
Yeah, I suppose the debate is starting to get dragged into society because you're starting to get the forces we saw during the COVID crisis when Black Lives Matter on one side and you had Churchill, you had the statue debate. And there does seem to be this concept of contested history. And you get people saying, teachers like myself are indoctrinating kids. And you're seeing a lot of political parties talking about this concept of curriculum and what should we teach at schools. And you get some political sort of side saying, we should only teach the positive side of the empire. We're encouraging children to hate their own country. Some outspoken critics have, suggested that we're raising a lot of children to, feel sorry and guilty for their history. And, it's this concept of, we don't have a go at the Italians about the Roman Empire. We don't have a go at the Norwegians about the Vikings. However, when I look at my classroom and I look at the diversity and I look at the situation in my classroom of individuals, and I teach in Derbyshire and in a not very multiracial sort of area. And yet I'm starting to see more diversity. I don't think our curriculum is up to date because the debate moves on and you get people saying, you're trying to change history. No, you're not. You're trying to make the curriculum reflect who we're currently teaching and our understanding of history, which is always constantly changing. You get people saying you're trying to change your history, you're attacking Britishness. But Britishness is a concept, and education is always moving, isn't it? We always update, we always do that. And that's what society does. So certainly that has to be the case when it comes to the empire, because the thing with history is it's a story, it's a narrative. It's even in the title of the subject. But you will get those that see history as quite important, the guardians of history. There's this concept you see now of people saying, well, you are trying to poison the next generation. There is a reason why people like Hitler went straight for the history and biology textbooks. One of the first things he did was rewrite the history textbooks in order to tell a story from the narrative of that point of view. So to finish, really, what I would suggest, and I do this, is I try and teach a broad and balanced version of the empire and let the children learn that. Because from my own personal point of view, I have a negative view of the empire. How could I not have a negative view of the empire? Because the empire was not good for me, my family. I've traced back to Queen Elizabeth when my land was confiscated. So I have personal feelings on that, but I try and put them to one side. The children ask me about, for instance, links of Oliver Cromwell. What am I going to say about Oliver Cromwell? Asking me about Oliver Cromwell is like, asking some German person how they feel about Eichmann. So we as historians can do that. I can say, here are my views. These are why I have my views. I'm okay to do that, but then say to the children, look, here's all the evidence, and I let them make up their own mind. And a lot of people don't like Cromwell when they say he bans Christmas. So it is about making sure you present both sides.
Here's the question though, Brent. Do you think that by you, because they'll look up to their teacher, they'll see their teacher as somebody who is a voice of authority. So, and you're a very strong orator, and you have very strong opinions. So do you think that by, let's say, someone says, what do you think of Cromwell? And you come out with that really strong opinion that you've just come out with, not maybe that specifically, but something along those lines. Do you think that by saying that, you're influencing? I know you're saying, hey, that's my view, and now I'm going to move on. Do you not think that just by being who you are influencing their point of view?
No, because I show them how I got to that view. It's important they understand, as a 47-year-old Irish educator, why my view of the world is the way my view of the world is. And then it helps them understand is, well, of course you would have that view from your background based on your set of experiences. So I'm trying to show them that you should have a different point of view of me, because you're 12, 11, 13-year-old children who've grown up a different place, a different time, and a different perspective in the world. So it is about showing them the different points of view that come from different people. And here's the thing with history. I always teach them, don't right or wrong. It's a question of, you have to respect different opinions, but understand the source of where they come from. I have another historian in my department. He helps co-write my work to make sure our work is balanced. And when I always ask the kids, go and speak to Mr. Connolly and ask him what his views are. And they'll be very, very different. So the kids get that broad and balanced even within my history department, because they've got two historians who do teach the same curriculum, but they have a different point of view. And even we sometimes play on that. We say, well, this is what Mr. Poland's view would be, because this is what Mr. Connolly's view would be, because, and then what is your view? And in fact, if I go the opposite, Tom, I'm trying to encourage them to create their own views and not mimic mine. And I think that's the problem. We have a lot of people out there are too lazy to formulate their own views and just latch on to other people's views rather than actually develop their own. I'm trying to develop their own critical thinking, is it not? But I'm modeling.
But counter argument, would it, and this is just going to probably be me and Brent arguing, guys, for the next 10 minutes. Go on, Tarjinder, go on.
I'm going to go, actually. I actually think what he's saying is the way it should be, right? So you should have different people in that department arguing different things. And here's the thing about empire. You can get very emotional about it if you want to. I'm not actually emotional about it at all. I actually don't care. If I'm absolutely honest, I don't care who took over, like my ancestors in the past. I care about my parents. I care about my siblings. I care about my nieces and nephews. And beyond that, I don't really care all that much. I don't go back and go, I've got this deep hatred of people. I don't care. There's too many people. Look, if I look back at my ancestors, they were taken over by too many people for me to just care about. So it was the British, it was the Mughals, it was whoever. Do you know what I mean? Alexander the Great, fine, great, good for you all. What am I supposed to do with it all? What am I supposed to do with all of that? Go and hate everybody. The problem that we have is not that empire shouldn't be taught. Empire should be taught. It should be taught properly. And we should teach every empire properly, regardless of how we feel about it. But we need to know it's one step in the process, and we may not like empire, but it was there. I may not like the British Empire any more than the Greek Empire, but it is what it is. And therefore, because it's history, you have to teach it as it was, not as you perceive it. And it's not this. And what's happening right now is that you've got this kind of victim narrative going on. There's the oppressor, there's the victim. Well, there's plenty of oppressors and plenty of victims. So how are you going to play this out properly in society? Because there's so many variations of this. So we're too diverse now. I hate to say it, we're far too diverse for us to ever just go for a simplistic like diversity or whatever narrative where we go, that's the oppressor, that's the oppressor, that's the person who's like being the victim. We can't do. There's no two people. There's there all over society, and what we're creating is a society where everybody picks their own historical battles, and we can't have that.
But can we? I've got a question though. Like, I don't really have much to say on this topic, but say, like, just based off what you're saying there, Tarjinder, can we put if somebody, you know, like, I know you're saying it's like a victim mentality, but is there like a sliding scale? Like, if people say, this is like my version of history, this is how I feel, I've been affected by empire or whatever else in history, is it like, can we put it on a sliding scale, or is it just fair to basically say that all of it, like, people should just move on from all of it?
Okay, so I see it this way. I have nothing. My parents might have something. They were just born after empire. My grandparents, by God, they get to like give some shit as far as I'm concerned, right? To anybody, because they were born during empire. But I can't pretend to be my grandparents. See what I'm saying? Like, and what people are doing right now is going, but we're like our grandparents. No, you're not. No, you're not. I'm not them. If they want to complain, if they wish to complain, they go ahead. But I don't get
one of the points of the history curriculum is to show patterns, and it is about the concept of empire. And one of the points I always make, you know, with, say, for instance, the Indian subcontinent. If the British Empire hadn't taken the Indian subcontinent, the Portuguese would have, the French would have. And I'm keen to point out, it is the concept of empire and this concept of bigger countries bullying other countries. Now, when you look at the world context today, I find it quite contradictory. We're pro-Ukrainian, and you're like, go Ukraine, you know, little plucky Ukraine, self-determination, defending itself against the evil Russian Empire. And you take the situations in Palestine, Israel, you take the situations globally, you talk about, you know, Donald Trump effectively trying to expand the American empire, colonialization, neo-colonialization. We're trying to get kids to understand these bigger concepts. The bigger concept is empire. Yes, the vehicle of the British Empire is important for children to understand who they are, where their history is, because the point of history is that we learn. The point of education is we learn. The idea of history is that we see the patterns of the past, we see where we are in the present, and these children, we want them to make better decisions than the previous ancestors. It's about learning. I don't teach Holocaust education because, you know, I'm interested in the facts. I'm teaching Holocaust education because I want never a genocide to happen again. I want the people who have made mistakes in the past to own them, put their hands up and say, right, that was wrong. We shouldn't have done that. And then we move on. So you take, for instance, Germany, it's, you know, they have reconciled to what they did as a country after what happened in the Holocaust. And as a country, they developed a better country as a result of the mistake. But you can only develop a better country if people hold their hands up and go and take some ownership and responsibility. Same as a children, we have to own mistakes. Sorry.
Halfway through the topic, guys.
Is history is morality. History is not morality. History is what it is. People have done what they've done, and they cannot change what they've done, and right or wrong. And what you're saying is that we should teach history as morality. Well, that doesn't go anywhere because everybody picks their own morality to some extent, right? Whether it's religiously or non-religiously or whatever. And that's where we get ourselves into a real problem, because what happens then is, because the second that you get us into a situation where our history is our morality, what happens is that you then have to go, well, we have to cull history. The cull the history we don't like. And actually, we shouldn't cull the history we like or don't like. And I have to say, I'm totally grateful to both my parents and my teachers. Nobody culled any of my history. Like, whether it be British.
Tinder, what do you mean by that, though? Can you give us a tangible example of what you mean by that?
for example, like when I was in year 6, I was taught British history in school, and I have to be honest, like my teacher was a bit, she would have been grown up with like all these ideas like British history being an empire being great, and she for once had to teach all of us maybe there were things that weren't so great, and I'd been taught that as well at home. But I was taught also that there were equally things that were good about British Empire. Now, I don't think anybody would confidently teach that the way she did these days, because they wouldn't have the backing of their own head teacher. It would look, the easiest thing to do right now is just go, it's all bad. It's all bad. Nothing good happened.
I don't know, because I listen, I liked a lot of some of the stuff you were saying, I really like, but on that particular point, when I was teaching over in Liverpool a couple of years ago, when I taught Empire, I taught about the railways, for example, and the sort of institutional sort of things that were introduced into certain countries as part of Empire, and that was part of the curriculum. That wasn't like me sort of going, oh, I'll do this, but it could be a risk. I just saw that as normal when I was teaching it, but maybe I'm an outlier. I don't know, Brent, but no,
I literally do. I do. When I do in India, I have on the one hand, the caste system was weakened, women's rights was increased, vaccinations, railways. However, I also caveat that with railways positive, but also railways are there to exploit resources. So even that's balanced in itself. So you go, here's British technology, but India is also the largest democracy in the world. The Indian education system is there. So you have to look at, and even the concepts of civilization. But I also caveat with, but who are we to go over there and tell them that their religion, their language is wrong? So everything comes with a positive and negative. The British Empire,
you could argue that those things are a few positive side effects of something that was fundamentally wrong. Yeah. But again, Tarjinder, I guess that comes back to what you were saying of bringing morality in to teaching, but sometimes that's impossible not to.
Okay.
It's nearly impossible not to. If you're teaching the Holocaust, it's very difficult to not bring morality in on some level.
No, I agree. But here's the other thing that I'd have to say is that if we genuinely believe in the value of these other people out there, then we would bring their scholarship in too. Who actually genuinely goes out there and gets the scholarship of like the Indians back in? So if you take the whole Bengal famine, which was like a massive thing, and maybe it's not anymore now, I accept that, right? But for a while, there was this whole thing like Churchill was a racist. He made the Bengal famine happen. Actually, he didn't. There was scholars in India who actually said, no, if you look at the actual records, what actually happened was he did try. Yes, it did. No one's saying the Bengal famine didn't happen. It did happen, but he didn't make it happen. What they're doing is skewing this history to go down a certain path. And what actually genuinely happened was he tried his best, but it was wartime. And he couldn't get the ships through. He couldn't do what he had to do. So if we genuinely value other voices, why don't we value other voices? It seems to me that sometimes when we talk about empire, it's ideological. It comes from a certain perspective, going to a certain perspective. It's got nothing to do with the actual people involved, and that's what I mean. It's like I can talk to my parents about empire. I can talk to everybody that I know, like within my own family, within the people that I know, and their version is very different to the people who are putting an ideological or a political perspective out there.
I don't think teachers are. I think that's the media spinning that. I think majority of teachers I've met, and I work with the University of Nottingham. I work with history groups.
Sorry.
No,
Brent.
they don't. I think that's minority. I think that is blown out of proportion. We wouldn't get away with it. Most history curriculums are now online. You wouldn't get away with it.
Yeah.
I'm serious.
Brent, let's not in the pitch.
Go on, Tarjinder.
It's nonsense.
Say, you cannot tell me that my own family is wrong about what they experience. That's not going to happen. That's not media. That's my own family. If you want me to say that there's media saying certain things, fine. But what my own family has taught me is what my own family has taught me. You're not telling me that media has taught me that. That's indoctrinated.
Then based on that argument, Tarjinder, can't other people then also say that their history, their version of history is what their family has taught them, and it could be completely different to yours?
completely, and it can be completely wrong, and I can be completely wrong. But what you can't say to me is like, oh, somebody taught you this out there when it wasn't taught to me out there. Do you see what I'm saying? Right? It cannot be both ways. I completely accept that. Maybe my mum said stuff to me that was completely wrong when I was a child. Fine, and maybe I think that makes me balanced, and that's wrong too. But what you can't say, it came from somewhere that it didn't come from. And he's saying that it came from somewhere else. It didn't come from somewhere else. It came from them. If they're wrong, fine.
The majority of history teachers teach like Tom and I do. We do it broad and balanced.
Yeah.
The media are stirring the pot when it comes to this culture wars nonsense, because they're basically trying to spin narratives that, and I don't agree with it whatsoever. I'm an Irish, was taught in England for 23 years. I'm a child of the Troubles. I'm teaching as broad and balanced as I'm going to teach, and I'm doing a damn good job. My curriculum is vetted. My curriculum is gone through many processes. I check myself. I check with other historians. I go to another university. I go to other things. I try and keep my curriculum up to date. I try to keep it as fair as possible, because I am actually quite worried. I am quite worried that somebody will actually turn around and say, is your history curriculum balanced? I've had parents question my history curriculum.
Yeah.
I am accountable. I am above board, and I am above reproach in that, because I have to be. Because I feel sometimes that there are eyes looking at me going, well, my parents weren't taught that at school. Well, of course they weren't taught that at school, because there has been a selective amnesia when it comes to teaching history. A selective amnesia is what you're talking about, Jacinda, where you have a situation where people pick and choose parts of history and they don't. Now, I recently had a right good go at practically every history writer in the country, because only 555 children in this country learn about Afghanistan, Iraq, and 9/11. That's it.
I was just about to ask that. Sorry, Tajinder.
It's like non-existent. It's like the Middle Eastern, teaching anything to do with the Middle East is non-existent. And then we have people out in the streets protesting, and people going, well, where are they getting that from? There is a massive gap in our actual curriculum, especially you take exam curriculum. It's World War I, World War II, Treaty of Versailles, blah, 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 Vietnam. You're like, for God's sake, historians are actually teaching the same stuff that was taught to them. We haven't literally moved our curriculum. We have not moved our curriculum.
I was just about to ask that. I was going to ask to the historians, why is so much also of the history in school based around, unless it's changed, American civil rights a lot, I believe, and very little about British history. I think there are a lot of children who don't learn anything about the role.
Let me give my take on that. And a lot of this is purely anecdotal, right? So this is... I have read a few bits actually about option choices, for example, but Nazi Germany, World War II, US civil rights are very popular topics with students. They want to do those topics. Yeah. And Brent will, I'm sure, verify this. When you have students in year 7 and 8, and I had some last week doing this in 7 and 8, when are we doing World War II? When are we doing the causes of World War II? When are we doing the atomic bombs? When are we doing right now? Right or wrong, that's what the students want. Now, of course, we as adults have to decide what a curriculum is, because in a society we we're that generation, right? However, I think there has to be, you have to be able to, I don't know what I'm trying to say. I'm trying to say that a lot of the students want that.
So right? You're saying that you have to try balance like catering for people interest as well as creating like a broad curriculum.
Correct. Because if I say to a group of students who have all said we want to do this, and I say we're going to study an obscure, now of course, that word obscure is open to interpretation. We're going to study an obscure part of history, which I don't have any resources for as a teacher. So I'm going to have to go away and become an expert on that area. Now, there would be an argument, of course, to say I should, right? And I get that. And I'm not adverse to that, but you do need time to do that. You can't become... Because there's one thing becoming knowledgeable on something, there's another thing to actually be able to teach it well. And I'm confident right now that I can teach certain topics well simply because I've done them a lot of times. And because I know that the students, and another perk of that approach is the students generally want that, because of course at GCSE, teachers, students have a range of different options to pick from, usually on most exam boards. And, when they're surveyed, a lot of them go for that. And of course, I guess that plays in with the teachers as well, because they go, oh, this is, which is bad, I guess. It's like, this is easier to teach. We've got more resources. We know it more. We can get better results because the kids are more engaged in it. So all I'm saying is I'm bringing that dimension in of the kids, the students into that conversation, rather than just what should be taught? Listen, if you said to me when I was 18 coming through university, what should be taught? Let's teach everything. Let's teach the fantastic, all the incredible things that have happened in the world. Then you go,
here is the problem. You have a generation of history teachers who are taught the same thing as they're teaching, and a generation who are teaching the same thing as they're teaching. And they get year 9, oh, we're doing Germany. Year 10, oh, we're doing Germany. Year 13, we're doing Germany. Hell, we're doing Soviet Union. And you get, seriously, guys.
But you asked secondary.
It's so narrow. It's so narrow.
As we've got a minute to go.
Sorry,
1 minute.
Secondary rather than primary. And I think genuinely, if we're going to answer this question about how do we teach empire, fine, I'll give you one answer, which is, I remember a parent saying to me, are you teaching empire? Are you teaching us to teach conflict in their heads over and over again? So what is it that you're doing? Because it's got to be one or the other. If you're teaching empire, fine, but you're teaching conflict in their heads over and over and over again to create conflict, that's a different thing.
All right, let's wrap up that topic there, guys, and move on to our second. We're doing good for time, better than last week.
Brilliant. Right. Well, I was about to say, Yasmin, you better get another Diet Coke out of the fridge.
Are we not sponsored by them, are we?
Water here. I need Coke or whatever. Go for it.
No. Wow.
So the next topic, is exclusion too simple an answer to children bringing knives into school? Now, this one was based on an article. I hope you guys saw it earlier this week, saying that to just simply exclude a child for bringing a knife to school. And obviously there was a really tragic incident that I saw as well on the news a week ago about a boy who was at school, a 15-year-old boy who was stabbed to death whilst at school. And I assume that the article is kind of off the back of that discussion. So anyone want to go first?
Right, so I proposed that article, and I proposed that article partly because I felt like, because there was another article as well, so that was Welsh, and the English, there was an English article as well too, where it referred to that we are mishandling children. So it all comes into the mix. Now, as far as I'm concerned, nobody is saying, so has there been a spate, I don't know, from January to now? Do you see what I'm saying? There was this article, but there's no real evidence of what's going on. So if we are starting to really mishandle children on a massive scale, fine. But there was a quote, numbers of children. What does numbers mean? And what I was really trying to do is challenge the government on this, right? If you're going to say to us numbers, give us the numbers. You're going to say what's happening. If you're going to say where is happening? Where is it happening? Don't just say to us that we are mishandling children, because I think, as far as I'm concerned, in my context, we are not trying to handle children whatsoever. But if you're going to restrict us from even what we have done, something has to have kicked off big time. I think the government is picking a topic that is wrong, and what they're going to do is make it much harder for anybody working in a really tough school that has to occasionally handle a child despite everything they've done. They're going to go back to the bad old days of basically don't handle anybody, you just watch a fight. That's what they're going to do. I don't think, I see what you're saying, but I don't think talking about exclusions per se, or the vulnerability it can create for some children, means that schools can't exclude. I think it would be crazy to take away that. About handling the children in the first place. That's what they're saying. You can't handle the children, and sometimes you have to handle children to get them away. My point is, we only had the Axel Rudy Cabana situation 3 weeks ago in court, literally killed 3 girls, and we know that his own head teacher and teachers had to actually handle him. Are we going to say that they cannot do that?
But they did, because my understanding was, although I don't know where obviously that's a different topic, but I don't know where, his prevent referrals came from, but I mean, most prevent referrals come from schools, even though that's a completely separate topic for me. So I would assume that his school did what they could, and it was probably the authorities that were much bigger than schools who essentially failed, in my opinion. But I don't think the article said that you can't handle children. But I mean, I would say, I think that bringing a knife to school should be like a non-negotiable permanent exclusion. Like, I know loads of people have been tweeting about this. I think it's the only way to set a precedent and be like, sorry, you need to go. Like, if you bring a knife to school, you are going to lose your school place. Like, that's not something that's welcome anywhere in our school community. And there is no kind of excuse for that. However, I think what I have an issue with, that I've seen a lot on X, is that loads of people will tweet things like, these children will go on to specialist services and, specialist schools that can deal with them better than mainstream can. And I just think that's really disingenuous. There are there are very few specialist school places for children. If you're excluded, what happens is, and I've been a senior leader in the PRU, what happens is you will go to a pupil referral unit based in your local authority of your home postcode. And you will now go from being in a mainstream school. Okay, yes, you brought a knife to school. I do believe you should be excluded for that. But then now you're going to go and be in a classroom with basically every other child in the borough who's probably done the same thing. And what then happens is, there's no, I feel like mainstream schools just, wash their hands off of children once they're excluded. But what should actually happen is, what I feel like I got from that article, that I feel like he was saying was too simple, was there should be consideration into what was the context. Even though the exclusions should still happen, there should be consideration. I've worked with a child before who'd been stabbed himself and then was permanently excluded maybe a fortnight later for being caught with a knife, and he'd never had a knife before he'd been stabbed. Do you know what I mean? So yes, there are some children, I also have taught children who will carry a knife because they just want to rob people in alleyways. Do you know what I mean? So I feel like that you need to look at what was the reason for this for this carrying a knife. If you can find one, there isn't necessarily always one, and then that should determine where that child goes. I think there are some children who have brought a knife to school who could potentially be managed moved to another school and don't necessarily need to go to a PRU. It could be a child.
I don't know.
I'm sorry.
This show is brought to you in partnership with John Catt Educational, publishers of professional development books and resources that support great teaching and learning in schools around the world. Don't miss out. Level up your professional development today and visit johncattbookshop.com to explore the full range of titles. Use the code JCTTR2425 for 20% off your order. Happy reading.
Meet USA Study, your one-stop platform for guiding students through their college application journey. Access up-to-date resources on universities, programs, scholarships, and application requirements, all in one place. Get easy-to-access tools, personalised timelines, expert tips, application templates, and exclusive webinars with admissions officers to help your student stand out. Visit usastudy.co.uk or call Phil at 0800 612 8271, because every student deserves the opportunity to shine with USA Study.
I think when you make that choice to carry a knife, you make that choice to carry a knife. You say, I'm going to carry a knife. There may be a reason you're doing it, but you're still making the choice to carry it, which says to me, you can make that choice again.
Well, yeah, but that applies to everything, everywhere. Do you know what I mean?
It does, but this one's high risk. This one's.
I know, but my point is, if you're a child, like, for example, if you look at county lines, for example, there's a reason why it's called modern day slavery. Like, a child can literally carry cocaine and go sell it to people, but they're still seen as a victim. And for some reason, that doesn't happen with knife crime. Like, this is what I mean. Yes, there are some children who carry a knife because they want to harm others. And there are children who carry knives because they want to, maybe injure other people, they want to rob other people. There's loads of things like that. But some children also genuinely carry, and even though it sounds really counterproductive and most of them get injured by you're more likely to get injured by carrying your own weapon than you are, to protect yourself. But some children, I do believe, carry a knife because they think they're protecting themselves. And I think that should be considered, because the risk isn't just to others, it's also to themselves and their children.
I disagree. But I'm going to allow other people to speak.
Go ahead.
Argue over this, right? Surely, if a child's only carrying a knife for themselves, they're not presenting anything towards anybody else, not even taking the knife out of like their bag or whatever it is. Well, why are they being excluded? They're not being excluded because they've got a knife per se, then, because there's nowhere that anybody can see that it's just in their locker or whatever. And in primary school, it wouldn't even be that. So it's only because they're branching it and actually threatening somebody that we find out. That's the truth of the matter. Let's be honest about this. We will only find out about a knife being in a situation like that because they are genuinely threatening somebody else, not just because they're carrying it. That's
well, some of them are for carrying, I know of children who've been caught with a knife because of a random bag search, which is like another thing I really support in schools. I think there are also a lot of children also get caught not because the knife was ever seen, but because they told other children or they showed other children who then wrote a statement.
I'm going to make a point. Why do Americans carry guns?
Sorry?
Why do Americans carry guns?
Good question.
Because they want to protect themselves. We don't call them.
Yep.
And they have a huge problem with...
That's so true.
It's the psychology. The psychology of fear. Psychology and fear. Fear drives brain development to 14. I'm not excusing it. There has to be consequences. No. They're children. They're children. They're children.
But the consequence is the exclusion. I love the hand.
Fear is an irrational thing that makes people do things they wouldn't normally do. Fear drives us, and our culture of our children is filling them full of fear. Every knife crime that we hear amplifies in social media. There's a culture of it. We need to attack the psychology of it. I mean, you could ban knives at school, but what am I going to do at the dinner table when they're sitting at their dinner table? Well, let's ban knives and forks. Sorry, guys, you're not getting knives and forks for your dinner table. You can stab each other.
Yeah, I don't think they should be banned. They shouldn't be banned.
It's the psychology. People want to hurt each other or people want to carry a knife. You've got to de-escalate. You have to take the temperature down. And that means getting the knives out of their hands. That means giving them more confidence. That means more youth work. That means more social services. If a child's been excluded from school, the community has failed. The parents have failed. The school has failed. We've all failed that child. That child is a flipping child in the sixth most wealthiest country in the world. That is wrong. Something that's fundamentally going wrong in our society.
Thanks, Brent.
Our society is like, you can blame the child. But you're blaming a child.
Thank
you.
Brent.
A child. It's a child.
Brent, let Tarjinder speak.
Go on, Tarjinder.
No, stop blaming everybody else apart from the child. Sometimes you have to take responsibility for your own behaviour. Oh, what is everybody else's responsibility?
Well, why can't they do both?
Actually, you chose to put that knife in your hand, right? Sometimes everybody else has done it. What you're doing is doing the blame everybody else, every adult, everybody who's tried towards you, not yourself. Sorry, at some point you've got to take responsibility.
Right. Well, then we set up prisons for 5-year-olds then. Let's set up prisons for 5-year-olds.
No, Brent, because that's the extreme end.
I love that.
You know what I mean? Let's get them in prison 5 years old. You know what I mean?
No.
You're education.
Hyperbolic.
What's the point in education? We're just not going to teach them. You know what I mean? Our job is to teach them.
Brent, let Tarjinder speak. Go on, Tarjinder.
No, but even 5-year-olds have responsibility towards their own behaviour. It has to be age-related. What you're saying is, well, we just treat children as like a whole, and they're basically babies up until this point. They're not like this up until this point. They are not babies to this point, and they become adults. They are gradually getting older, and they get more and more responsibility, and we have to teach it to them. You cannot say to me that a 15-year-old is the same as a 5-year-old. They're not. I would treat a 5-year-old differently to a 15-year-old, but you won't, because you think, well, it's all the same. Well, that's not good enough. I'm sorry, but a 15-year-old carrying a knife is not the same as a 5-year-old carrying a knife.
Yeah, that's fine. That's fine. But a 15-year-old, like, children are still protected by, additional laws because it takes their age into consideration. Like, yes, a 15-year-old is completely different to a 5-year-old. I agree with that. But a 15-year-old is still a child, and they don't have full brain development. There's loads of things they need to be protected, and that needs to be considered. That's something that needs consideration. So there should be, for me, that article, what I got from it was, and honestly, I'm not against the exclusion of a child bringing a knife into school. It's just, for me, it's consideration given to the reason, because there are genuinely reasons where children are victims, and to put them in a position that puts their life further at risk because of their bad behavior. Like, I feel like we're basically saying, if your life is, you know, worth less because of the fact that you were carrying a knife. So if something now happens to you, it happens to you because you were carrying a knife and this other child wasn't, so they deserve more safety than you do. That's how I interpret that.
But you are forgetting that carrying a knife is quite an extreme. Carrying a knife or a gun is quite an extreme. You can punch somebody in the face.
It is.
It's a very extreme. We're talking about the hang on, let me finish. We're talking about the most extreme sort of thing you can do, especially as a child. Now, all I'm suggesting is, and this I guess goes back to your point you asked me earlier, is I don't like the idea of a projection that carrying a knife is not zero tolerance by saying we might send you somewhere else, or you might have a different opportunity if we discover in our interpretation of events that you carried a knife because of X, Y, Z. For me, that just takes us a little bit down that road of not zero tolerance. And
no, I don't think it does.
Because
the zero tolerance is you are losing your school place. That is the consequence. You are being removed from the school environment.
But then if we as the adults say, okay, student X, we perceive, because remember, a lot of this is perception. 2 weeks ago, I was in a fight and I felt threatened. Okay, we weren't there. We don't know what that was all about. We don't know what truth there is in that matter. And then 2 weeks later, that student does something. Now, I'm saying the adults, unless there's concrete evidence of X, Y, Z, and even if there is, again, there's interpretation there, because you could argue there's never an excuse to carry an offensive weapon. But even if we did, I don't think that should then quantify going, well, after it's happened, we're going to exclude you, but do you know what? We'll put you down that avenue because we feel as adults that you deserve a better situation than this kid who we don't. I just struggle with it, because I just think if we're sending out a message that it's not just fully zero tolerance. Now, I do think that what Brent raised on the age thing is quite important, because I think obviously the younger you get, the less responsibility you can potentially take. I think that's a very important qualifier. Okay.
No, that's not a qualifier. It's not a total qualifier, because if you're stood in front of a child, even alive, he's got a knife, and they're threatening you and threatening the children. Sorry, you're gonna have to take action. You will. You won't take the same action as a 15-year-old, but you have to take action. You can't say nothing. You can't say we're just gonna stand there.
No. I'm not saying nothing, but I was talking about a zero tolerance exclusion, and then they head off to wherever. I'm saying that as a 5-year-old, there's diminished responsibility. I mean, that's a legal precedent, isn't it?
You do know the police can basically arrest you at any age. It's only that you got criminal responsibility at 11. They can arrest you before then, though. So
I've got a question for you. What are your thoughts then? Well, it's to all of you. What are your thoughts then on if a child, brings a knife to school? I support their exclusion, but now, since you're going to be going to a pupil referral unit based on your postcode, should that child then therefore be in the same class as every other child in the borough that's brought a knife into school? Like, what about the risk to their life?
That's a different question. That's a different
it's not
question.
though, because the exclusion leads to that. So this is what I mean.
In our current system of how it's set up.
Yeah, so that's what I'm saying.
I'm not saying I agree with that. I'm not saying I agree with that.
So that's where I'm saying I think the exclusion, that is zero tolerance. But then the destination post-exclusion is that classroom. It's that pupil referral unit based on where you live. And so that's what I'm trying to say. It doesn't make it zero tolerance to then consider different destinations for pupils based on the reason. Now, a child just saying to you, I felt threatened. I agree with you. That's not evidence-based. It needs to be evidence-based. But there are loads and loads. There are countless examples where children themselves have have been attacked by knives and then started carrying a knife. They've seen someone be attacked by a knife. Even children, exactly as Brent was saying, there are some children who are deeply affected by the amplification of social media stories about knife crime. You know, these are like, it's like plane crashes. You always hear about them. And, you know, that does have an impact on like the development of some children and their perception of their safety, especially based on where they live. Even if you look at a single school catchment, children don't live in the same places. Some unfortunately can live in more dangerous environments than others. And these things all feed into, you know, what they do. I agree. Like carrying a knife is crazy. It's a very high level thing. I completely agree. And that's why I will never say that a school shouldn't exclude based on that. I just think the aftermath definitely needs more thought. You know, I think mainstream schools often just wash their hands off of children, and that's what causes their life chances to plummet.
Sorry, maybe you're talking about secondary, but in primary, I've never seen a child do something that extreme and then go straight to Prue. Like, genuinely, I've not seen it. All I've seen is us trying to get that child back, speak to family, do whatever we can, like, you know, put it together. It's not like this happens, that happens.
So they don't get excluded.
Okay, no, but they might get excluded at home. They're not getting excluded completely and go to a Prue and that's it, you're out of school. That's not what's happening to children in primary. That's not what's happening to us. Like, you
Interesting. I didn't know that.
Sorry, but don't do it and that easily. Sorry, you do have to, like, we do think these things through, and maybe it is more quick in secondary, but then I would argue in secondary you've got other children to think about too, and you may not like the fact that kid has got like slight punishment, but what do you do about everybody else? What do you do about them then? What do you do about the safety of every other child in that class? Because quite frankly, we all know we'd be devastated if anybody was actually injured. So we can give sympathy to that child who brought a knife in, so long as that child didn't actually injure anybody else. But the minute they injured somebody else, you'd be devastated. You would.
Of course.
I have a scenario for you. Child excluded from school. Child hasn't learned from exclusion. Child falls off the radar. Child goes to a party. Social media, posts up, I'm going to do this, going to do that. Other kids egg him on. Child then goes and stabs another person. We haven't solved that problem.
Extreme though, isn't it? Extreme.
No.
It happens.
Actually, has happened in my community. No. That has happened. That's happened in my community. That has happened. That child was excluded. Social services failed that child. Everywhere failed that child. It fell through the cracks. Then they reappeared. And
1 second, Tajin. Sorry, what's that, Tajin? I can't hear you.
Sorry, how often has that happened that we need to make that? Like,
it's increasing. No, it's increasing. That's becoming a pattern now. Yeah. And that pattern is now escalating because more are carrying knives. Because the more they hear that, the more they go, well, I need a knife to protect myself. Now, you and I were all logical people. We're adults. They're children. They don't think like this. They think differently.
You're creating one. You are creating a moral panic out of nothing. So this is like basically a really extreme example that has happened once. And you're saying, well, we should make rules out of like, never make
rules.
There's
a kid got stabbed in a flipping school in Sheffield. That's not moral panic.
One example is not.
Oh, it's not.
That's a very significant example.
It's increasing. We have a cultural problem. We need to
accept it. If you're getting harder on this situation, I'd get accepted, but you're not. You're going to get more likes. That's going to create more of this, not less of this. Not less.
So can I just interject? Sorry, can I just interject and say we are technically out of time, but it's up to you guys if you want to continue.
5 more minutes. We have to fit. We'll say 5 more minutes. We'll put a 5-minute limit on it, right?
I could go forever. I could go forever.
I was just gonna sort of say that I get exactly what you're saying, Yasmin, about what happens after they're excluded. I understand that. And I agree with you that that's
I'm so
not
happy to hear that.
Yeah, no, I do. I agree with you on the part of they're going into a room with other people who may have potentially been carrying or using knives. 100%. That's why I don't think that's why I think there should be other avenues.
Yeah.
Rather than an AP. No, but people probably wouldn't like those avenues because they go, no, that's too harsh, that avenue. For somebody who's, I'm not talking about someone who's carried a knife. I'm talking about someone who's either threatened someone with it, shown intention to use it, or used it. For me, that's a different category to carrying, even though carrying is extremely bad. But I'm saying if you've done one of those three, I don't think you should be going AP. if you're over a certain age, 11, 13, 15, whatever age it is, I just think that's not enough, because we have to have a zero tolerance message coming through. And if there is any thought in a kid, a teenager's head, I might get away with this, we can't afford any scenario where a kid thinks, look, I saw a sentence that my mate John got, he did all right. So actually, I'm being threatened. I'm not saying I want to do this, but from a deterrence point of view, I can afford to, because look what happened to him. He just got a managed move. Do you see my point?
Yeah, no, I see your point. So like, look, I think that carrying a knife should be a permanent exclusion. I think at the very least, you need to be removed from that school community that you were in. Being in a school is a privilege. And I think, children should be reminded of that all the time. I think it's the only way to set a precedent where, a child knows I can't, I can't have an excuse and get my way out of, you bought a knife to school, you were found with a knife, you are going. That needs to happen. But when I say managed move, what I mean is, like you said there, Tom, you differentiated between, the context behind what a child's actions, or why they had the knife, for example. And I think that should determine, if we're saying that all children's lives are equally valued, then their outcomes shouldn't be based on their actions and what they've done. It should be based on just the fact that their life is valuable. And you've acknowledged there, Tom, putting them into a classroom where they're now sitting with every other kid who's done the same thing is really dangerous, and that can really impact their life, and they're probably far more likely to become a victim. Sorry?
Yeah.
So I'm just saying, I see what you're saying. Part of my view could potentially make children feel like, okay, but that person, didn't have that bad an outcome, so maybe I can get away with this. And I totally agree that teenagers need to know, or children need to know, they can't get away with this. But then that's a bigger debate for me, because that feeds into the criminal justice system and the complete disparity in outcomes there as well. I was in a privilege, I would see children commit the same offense, and one of them would get no further action, and the other one's going to like youth offense yacht meetings, and it's like they would discuss amongst themselves like, well, that person got away with it, so like that's bigger than schools. And so for me, one last thing,
go on.
The argument for me does also go back to this impossible position that schools are in to deal with all these things, where there's all these services around schools that are just failing and are contradicting schools. It's just a really quick story, even though it's not a knife. When I was in the pupil referral unit, we had this policy where vapes were banned. Children could bring a vape to school, but in the morning when you're like wanded with the metal detector, you had to hand it to us and we'd put it away for you along with your mobile phone, and you could get it back at the end of the day. Personally, I thought it was a crazy policy, but I went with it because it wasn't me who made it. I just had to follow it. And so the rule was, if you were caught with a vape during the school day, your vape would get smashed and thrown away as a consequence. And there was a year 8 girl that was caught with a vape, and she was in an office and she just completely trashed a deputy head teacher's office because she wanted her vape back. So the school called the police because of the violence. And when the police showed up, I kid you not, they said, give her back her vape, hand back the vape. And that child's vape could never get taken again. You could never take their vape because it set this precedent for her, which was like, well, the police were on my side. And so for me, this conversation can't happen without discussing all the other statutory services and public services, because a lot of them directly contradict the work of schools and put them in an impossible position as well.
I agree with that, actually. Do you know what? Genuinely, we need to have like firm policies where we all agree. And here's the thing, funnily enough, you might not, I think I'm strict. I am strict sometimes, but I genuinely do not believe in rules for the sake of rules. If we're going to have rules, we enforce those rules, or don't have them in the first place. I'm perfectly happy I genuinely would be happy just for kids to have caps, for example. If you let them have caps, have them. But what you don't do is say, you can't have caps, and then when they do, you allow them. Do you mean just because they're being difficult? That's what I don't like. Is I don't like that aspect of it. I think the purpose of this article was, okay, do we get protection as teachers when we safeguard children and when we handle them, or don't we? Because if we don't get any safeguarding when we handle children, if they're going to make it difficult for us because of some unknown case out there, Fine. But what's going to happen is what happened before. There has been a history behind this, and it's not about the extreme stuff that you were talking about. What was happening was when we had basically a no handling policy in schools, was nursery children who were crying were not given a hug. That was what was going on. We basically kept in primary we kept children at arm's length, basically, because if we were seen to touch them, you might get sacked. That cannot happen. I'm not saying like there's proper safeguarding, there's proper conduct, but when children want to hug you when they're 5, you just let them. You cannot say to me there's an epidemic of problems here, like nothing's happening around me. And I agree, if there is, then tell me. That was the point of those 2 articles, was like, if something's genuinely happening, tell me. What we're not doing is going back to what was happening 20 years ago, because that was awful too. I remember when I was being trained, and all I had was like, so I remember like the male deputy head saying there's this nursery child who was desperately crying and he would not pick him up. He would not pick him up. He would not hug him for the sake of his job. That is basic human contact you give to a nursery child, if that they were your family or they were just there. And for him to be scared in an assembly hall of all places was just ridiculous. You can't do this. You can't do this to people. So if they're going to go down this route with that policy, they need to think it through. What are you doing to primary, to secondary, whoever?
Thank you, Sarjinder. And I think, guys, do you think that's a good place to end? I saw a hand up there, Brent. Go on.
Yeah.
Final point.
My last point. Look, Carrington's
this will be, guys, set your timers here, because this is going to be Ronald Reagan's. This is going to be Ronald Reagan's eulogy when he left as president. Go on, Brent.
2005, Glasgow had a problem. Glasgow solved that problem with education and a multitask force and a multifaceted approach, of which education was part of it. We can't shift the problem. We have to deal with the problem, or else we're going to be in a USA society and we'll end up with a death penalty for kids carrying knives, which doesn't solve anything. Carrot works better than stick. We've got to figure it out. We've got to figure it out.
Next.
No, we have to figure it out. We have to turn around and look at these young people and say, why are they doing it? It's a social science. We've got to figure them out.
Come on.
We can condemn them. We can blame them. We can throw everything we want at them, but they're still going to do it. They still find a way. And that doesn't work. Longer sentences. The government will go strict and say, we'll have longer sentences for knife crime. That won't solve it. We'll have longer prison sentences. That won't solve it. Our prisons are full. Our prisons are full. So what are you going to do? Whack more prisons. We'll get Borstals back where we can battle them into submissions, or, get some of my old Catholic priests back that we send them to hell. Doesn't work. It doesn't work. We know that doesn't work. It makes us feel good that these kids get removed from the general population, but we're not solving the problem. We're shifting the problem. And I've seen how that problem gets shifted, and then it's a society's problem. Because it's a school problem, then it becomes a society problem. We need to stop it at source, so we need to deal with it before it even becomes a school problem, which means we're part of a multifaceted approach.
You cannot advocate for the minority of children who are violent above the majority of children who aren't. You cannot.
We're not doing that. We're not doing that.
No. I'm trying to solve the minority. I'm trying to solve the minority rather than what? Let's put them in a pen. Let's just isolate them from the rest of them. Let's get an island.
If we're saying,
put them all on an island.
Also, if we're saying that the lives of children are equally important, there is no minority and majority.
No,
it's not what I'm saying. I'm trying to solve the problem, not trying to solve the problem by shifting the problem. I want the problem solved. I want these young people who have a choice in life and they chose the wrong choice. But I want them to go back to that point where they made that wrong choice and somehow get them to make the right choice.
Yep.
That's what we're talking about. You're suggesting that they make the right choice because they'll go, oh, if I do this, there's consequences. They don't think like that. Come on. We know how children think. We've got to put stuff in the mind cycle of how they think. Change that outcome and put them that direction rather than, because what happens when they go that direction is they're just going to get worse and worse.
Depends what the consequences are. You could argue that we don't have any consequences anymore. Really.
That's part of the problem because we don't have.
Yeah, you're saying the kids don't care about the consequences, but that could be because there are no proper consequences anymore.
But by the time we come to excluding a child after carrying a knife, it's too late. We need to get to the thought. We need to get into, why do they carry a knife? Why do we carry guns in America? Why?
America's more complicated than that. Just for a little bit.
That works. Let's give everybody a knife.
America's different. It goes back to their whole feeling of
It's not.
independence. The British.
It's not. No, the
carrying the
psychology.
guns
Really,
is about
the psychology. You keep up with social media. Our kids are speaking in an American accent. Thank you very much. They're all practically American in disguise. The way they're, hi there, guys. Like, I mean, 6-year-olds now telling me to like and subscribe. We've got a 5-year-old football. Foden's kid is now on social media at 6 years old. Our kids are practically Americanized, and they're starting to hear this stuff. And this culture's coming in, this fear culture. So we've got to stop the fear culture. Got to stop the fear culture.
Our kids, that's the headline. Our kids are becoming American.
They literally are. Are they not? They're even speaking American.
This is not relevant. It's not relevant.
Is it not?
But that's what makes it great.
For the most part,
This is relevant.
I'm not even the most
It's
controversial.
psychology. Fear. They live
Brent,
in fear.
when you speak, Tarjinder can't speak because she goes on mute. That's the only problem.
So I'm going off on one against you because, quite frankly, you are being hyperbolic over and over and over again.
That is true.
It applies to you, Brent. It applies to us as well. You cannot take your situation as a secondary, apply to them in primary, and I can't do the equivalent. But at least I'm trying to understand. You're just going off on one like this entire universe. And like I was trying to say, Tom, I thought when I came in, I was going to be the controversial one. Apparently, it's him.
Of course, it's me.
All the time.
Well,
You've
we
got-
have 6-year-olds carrying knives. We've had 6-year-olds carrying knives.
Get a grip. You don't have them that often. I'm sorry, 6-year-olds are not carrying knives.
Once is too many.
Enough. Yeah.
Once is too many. I couldn't carry. Once is too many. I have a 6-year-old. Do I want her going to primary school with a kid with a knife? You're damn skippy, you don't.
All you're employing towards me is hyperbole. There is not enough 6-year-olds carrying knives that we would be generally worried as teachers in
There
a
are
primary.
4 incidents in schools every week of children attacking teachers with
But
knives.
is that with 6-year-olds, 5 and 6-year-olds though?
That's coming into primary. It's starting to come in. The pattern is there. The pattern is increasing. For God's sake, open your eyes. The statistics are there. There is an increase in violent crime in schools. There's an increase in violence in schools. There's an increase in culture. My point is, the more this increases, the more this escalates, the more it's going to increase because the pattern is set. Once the pattern starts increasing, what Yasmin's trying to say is, once kids start to feel the fear, they're more likely to carry a knife. Then because another one carries a knife, they're going to carry a knife, they're going to carry a knife. And that's the relevance to what I'm saying in America, because everybody carries a gun because everybody else carries a gun because they're walking around afraid of each other. And that's what's starting to happen to the psychology of this country. People are scared. Kids are scared. And when you're scared, you are irrational. You're not logical. You're not thinking with the part of the brain that we know. You're thinking in fight and flight. Come on, we know neuroscience on this. We know what happens to people when they go into fight and flight mode. Fight and flight mode puts them into a survival mode. And when they're in a survival mode, they do things they wouldn't normally do, think in ways they wouldn't normally. We know this about neuroscience. Our children are caught in a survival mode, and some of them are that scared. So we need to give our kids more confidence in themselves. We need to educate them, not exile them or not throw them on the scrap heap, because when they're thrown on the scrap heap, they're going to become society's problem. And then we're going to have a bigger problem to sort with, because a 14 or 15-year-old, we might be able to do something with, but a 35 or 34-year-old, look at the Cabana situation. How many times was that flagged up by schools? He was flagged up in schools. How many times? Teachers did our job. We said, this kid is dangerous. This kid is dangerous. This kid is dangerous. This kid is dangerous. And nobody picked it up. We did our job.
Yeah.
So we are. How many times was he excluded from school? Where did he go? That's the bigger issue.
Let Tarjinder come in now, Brent.
Tom's like, I've had enough of you.
But what I'm saying is, I'm not seeing a general spate of 5-year-olds bringing in knives. I agree with you that there may be an increasing thing going on, and therefore we need to see it. But what we don't have to do is be hyperbolic in the state. And I don't see a child in primary. I've never seen it. Honestly, if it's happened, fine. But I've never seen a child who's done something dangerous on the first instant being permanently excluded in a school. In a primary school, we give them more chances than that. Unless it's absolutely something that cannot be brought back. Do you know what I mean? As in you're trying to kill somebody, right? You'd have to be doing it. You have to be stabbing somebody in the heart or something to be permanently excluded. It has to be that serious. They're not just excluding in primary for nothing. They're doing it for repeated instances of the same thing. It's not the one thing. I think you're acting like, or what it comes across to me like, it's like these kids come in with like a knife on one occasion and we're excluding them. We're not permanently excluding them. We're not doing that in primary. I'm sorry, we're not. Which we are trying to understand. It's just like, what can we do?
And well, then the same should be done in secondary. And I don't mean that they shouldn't be excluded, but I mean what can be done, which is what Brent is saying, should be given more consideration rather than just displacing the problem, which is what's currently happening.
No, and I appreciate that, because I think he's right. But we have to think, okay, has there been a history of this? How many times has it happened? How many people has it affected? Okay, what do we have to do? I'm not saying that we shouldn't have that, but the problem is we don't have that, because what we have is like an excuse culture, or we have, okay, either we have all or nothing. I feel we have all or nothing. Either we have a complete excuse culture, or we have total punishment, and there doesn't seem to be anything in between. If I'm honest, I don't feel there's anything in between that I can go to sometimes. It's one or the other, and I do think we should be more nuanced.
Yeah, that's good to know.
That's fair enough. I think that's a fair comment.
Yeah,
and my only thing I was going to say on that was, and I knew this would happen when Brent did his final speech, which was never going to be a final speech. He was going to drop about 20 hand grenades and then walk off, right? But when Brent said earlier about going onto the scrappy, right? We'll put kids onto the scrappy. There will be many who would interpret a child being permanently excluded as going on the scrappy, full stop. So just that. There will be many out there who will say permanent exclusion, putting them on the scrappy, right? There will be some who will say putting them in prison, putting them in the scrappy.
But there is a huge link between permanent exclusion. By the way, I fully believe in the permanent exclusion to prison pipeline, and could give you so many stories on that. Like I fully believe it. I do.
That doesn't mean we don't.
Again, though, choices, Yasmin. That phrase suggests there is no choice along the way. It suggests
I don't want to be like fatalistic.
It suggests there is a pipeline, and we push students through it, and they go from exclusion to AP to prison, and they just flow along this pipeline. There's no choice. There's no sort of, hang on a minute, I'm 17.
Stop by County Lines, pick up some drugs. Stop by Community Chest, pick up some weapons.
This is not funny. This isn't funny. No, look, first of all, no one's saying that schools are pushing them along. I'm also, look, I feel like there could be more than one truth.
It's a pipeline.
It is a pipeline. It is. And I would happily explain why if we have time.
Sorry, when you blame us, you insist we have to take everything on board. We have to make it change. Whereas actually there has to be some action on your part. Genuinely, as a person, if you wish to change, we can help you, but we cannot be you, right? So even the most the child that you think should have had the most help has got to do something back, even if it's just responding.
Who said they're not? Who said they're not?
Well, because they're all going from exclusion to prison.
Or
it's not like a kid just being like, okay, I've been excluded. Look, it's funny because I remember Tom Bennett once said, like, he once tweeted something about, should it be a surprise that someone that's been excluded from school then ended up, with a criminal record or was more likely to commit crimes? And I actually, I found it somewhat like it's really true. It's true that your behavior at school could potentially be linked to your behavior later on in life as an adult. However, what I would say is
that's what he was saying by that.
Yeah, no, I actually found it funny because, when I saw him tweet that, I thought, well, it's true. Like, I completely understand that argument, but this school to prison pipeline isn't necessarily just this fatalistic thing of like, okay, a child's brought a knife to school. Okay, they've now gone and stabbed someone at the age of 20. It's not like that. When you lose school is such a big protective factor. Being in school from 8 to 3 every day protects you from so many societal issues. And when you lose that, children's attendance plummets when they go to a behavior school, when they're excluded. And that exposes them to far more risks, including things like county lines. Adults that groom them, their sense of fear and safety gets worse. They're more likely to carry a knife. They're also more likely to become a victim of crime. And that's ignored. And that's often what a lot of these children who go on to become perpetrators of crime were excluded and then became victims of crime. And that's the part that's often ignored in this pipeline for me.
But one child is not worth 29, and that's what
they're all equal to me. They're all equal. I don't determine children based on their actions. Their outcomes for me is not linked to their action.
Has to be protected more than those 29. He's bringing a knife into school, therefore he has to be protected more than them. We've just got to tolerate that knife.
That's not what we're saying. Why are we pitting children against each other? It's not one versus the other. I just don't, honestly, I personally, that's what, ironically, that's what I feel like this article was saying is simplistic. I see that argument all the time, and I don't like it, because if you are saying that we're not placing the lives of children on a sliding scale based on whether or not they did or didn't bring a knife to school, or based on whether they were or weren't excluded. The safety, yes, this is why I support exclusions. By supporting exclusions, I'm supporting the safety of the children when somebody has breached the school's behavior policy and code of conduct, but their life is valuable.
Going to prison then?
But I'm
just saying if a child is excluded, their life chances plummet significantly, because there aren't enough services after they're excluded. The schools are not good enough. I've worked in a Peru.
Well, Yasmin, one thing you haven't said in all of what you've said is young people can make choices to give up on opportunities that are in front of them. So you mentioned this.
I feel like that goes without saying. Like, I feel like I don't.
But it's almost like the narrative seems to be that they're helpless and there's nothing they can do. They almost can't make a choice.
No,
but if they
Yasmin's saying, some children have a small pool of life chances.
Exactly.
Some of those children have very small pool. And the social mobility in this country is getting narrower and narrower and narrower. Exactly. That exclusion from school could be the deciding factor that finishes that child off. Because that child rescue, education is a rescuing factor. Education is a rescuing factor. Our job.
No one's denying that. Well, I'm not denying that.
No. When a child bullies another child, I try and rescue the bullied child and figure out why they're bullying. I want them to stop bullying. I want to make sure that they're not going to. And the child who's being bullied, I want to make sure they don't pass the bullying on. What we're seeing is the child who's bullied is now then going to go bully another child. Then that child goes bully another child, and that's what we're seeing is the escalation. What's happening with the psychology of this knife crime? Kids are now, no. That's where it's happening. That's the psychology at base level. That's what's happening. Get down, get off the high horse, go and speak to the community, go into a community that has knife crime and ask them what is happening. These children have lower life chances, and school is sometimes in a community the only thing that is going to make a difference to these children.
Thank you.
Argument. Give me evidence, not an emotional argument. You'll give me.
No, that is evidence. What evidence would you like? Would you like the statistics in the crime? Would you like social deprivation statistics? Would you like to see the connection between social deprivation statistics, health outcome? Would you like me to give you the statistics on that? The statistics are there. I deal with this. I'm dealing with this. All of those things are eventually connected. They're connected.
You've talked about where you can get the statistics from, and you've argued that it's real, but you haven't given me any actual statistics. This is not reality until
What do you mean I haven't given you statistics? Knife crime is on the increase. There's more knife crime. There's increased poverty. There's decreased social mobility. There is decreased social mobility. We're not paying attention. Well, you're not paying attention during COVID when we saw the different outcomes. The rogue algorithm discriminated against working class kids. We have poverty indexes in some parts of the Western world. 76 is the life expectancy in some communities. And around the corner, we've got 82 as a life expectancy. We have schools which are now not disservicing their communities because they're too busy paying their CMATs more flipping money. And they're off-roading children. No, more children are off-road.
Brent, let's hop in to speak.
Brent, no statistics have been given to me. You've given me vague argument after vague argument after vague argument. All of it's emotional. Not a single.
No,
I completely disagree with you. What statistics have you given?
We have run out of time. Okay, we have run out of time. Listen. This is just show one. This is show one. Imagine what we're going to be like after show 10. Know what I'm saying? Sunday's not going to be Sunday anymore. All right. So listen, it was what an amazing conversation.
I need a cup of tea.
Yeah, no, but seriously, I mean, a lot of it just reflecting back. It's good because I think, and hopefully people watching this back or listening to this back will have the same experience. I think hopefully this show is going to make you think. It's going to make you maybe reflect or reconsider or maybe think about different angles or different viewpoints or different experiences. I don't know what, but that's the hope from these conversations. You know, we're not going to ignore issues, because these are very difficult issues to discuss. So we're not going to ignore them. We'll keep the conversation going. So just want to say a big thanks to everybody for joining in. Yasmin for hosting, Brent, Tarjinder. It's been superb. So it's on YouTube. It'll sit on YouTube if you want to watch it back, if you've got this far. And also we'll pop it out as a podcast. And what we're going to also start doing, maybe down the line, we'll start inviting you guys in after we actually go off air, so we can continue the conversation with more people. Why not? But off air, that'd be great. That's what we'll do further down the line. So listen, thanks very much, everybody. We'll be back next Sunday at 9:30. And see you later.
This show is brought to you in partnership with John Catt Educational, publishers of professional development books and resources that support great teaching and learning in schools around the world. Don't miss out. Level up your professional development today and visit johncattbookshop.com to explore the full range of titles. Use the code JCTTR2425 for 20% off your order. Happy reading.
Meet USA Study, your one-stop platform for guiding students through their college application journey. Access up-to-date resources on universities, programs, scholarships, and application requirements, all in one place. Get easy-to-access tools, personalised timelines, expert tips, application templates, and exclusive webinars with admissions officers to help your student stand out. Visit usastudy.co.uk or call Phil at 0800 612 8271, because every student deserves the opportunity to shine with USA Study.
You've been listening to Teachers Talk Radio. Tune in live and listen back at ttradio.org. We look forward to hearing from you next time on Teachers Talk Radio.